The Encounter by Vincent6273. This is meant to be a cautionary sharing of the encounter I had, and to not speak, joke, or disrespect the names of certain beings or whistle at night. You probably know what I am talking about. This is a true story that my friends and I experienced, and I would like your thoughts on if we encountered one. We used to joke about the name of a certain Navajo legend, using it to scare our friend who had no idea what it was when he got high. Admittedly, at the time it was funny. However, that all changed on Friday, June 13th between the hours of 2 to 3 a.m. No, I'm not joking about the time or date. A group of friends and I were hanging out in a cul-de-sac that borders a large hill where no houses are. The hill is surrounded by houses all along its borders, but a large chunk is only brush and trees with trails. Less than half a mile away is a large nature preserve bordered by mountains that lead to Black Star Canyon, California. My friends wanted to smoke some weed and were being a bit loud. I didn't want to disturb my neighbors, so I suggested we walk up the trail a bit and smoke there. While on the trail overlooking the houses, we heard a loud snapping sound, like a tree branch snapping, not like twigs. We heard this sound around 10 or so times, in irregular intervals, over the course of around 15 minutes. My friends didn't pay much mind to it, but I was focused on it. I didn't smoke, so I was sober through all of this. While listening to it, I thought a name. Eventually, we decided to go back to the cars and closer to the houses. Then, while walking at the end of the trail, we heard a loud crying. It sounded like it could have been a child. The crying was loud and went on for more than 10 minutes. By this time, we were at the cars talking about the crying. The time by now was probably closer to 3 a.m. by this point. Then, while we were talking about the crying, I heard some twigs snap in the brush on the hill behind the cars. I turned and looked, scanning the hill. I thought I saw something move, but it could have been the breeze moving a bush. Then we all heard a quiet, quick whistle from the hill. I turned to my friends and asked them if they heard that. Then, when they said they did, I then asked if any of them did that. They all shook their heads. When we realized this, we ran into the cars and drove down the hill to the parking lot of a CVS. While there, we all got into one car to talk about what happened. Then we saw a coyote cross in front of the car, maybe 100 feet away, looked at us, then left. I've taken this experience as a massive warning never to play around or disrespect its name again. I went from a skeptic who only enjoyed subreddits like this and listening to horror stories on the internet, to downright terrified to even think the name or be alone outside. The truth of the reality is, we are a bunch of 20-year-olds who just freaked ourselves out, but it was just a strange combination of events after fucking around. I urge everyone to not make the same mistake we did, joking around and saying the name. My girlfriend saw a crawler in her remote hometown almost 20 years ago. By Glittering Fox 9769. I thought I'd share this story since it's something that should be out there. She says crawlers, or the rake, are the closest representation of what she saw. Rural Ontario, Canada, by Lake Simcoe in a small fishing village. She was about 9 or 10 when this happened. She and her cousins were playing by the lake in a small clearing, and next to them was a forest patch of land near some houses. There is a mossy and rocky slope here with a few flat depressions in the rock on the way. While walking away from the clearing toward the woods, through the trees, all three of them saw a strange gray humanoid figure crouched down as if it was eating. No noises. They couldn't make out what was on the ground, but it was some sort of large brown mammal. The crawler had a bald gray head with a humanoid face, but it had no fat whatsoever on its body. It was long and slender, and the hands and fingers were very long and horror-like, all gray and smooth. It never noticed the kids. They were obviously horrified, but being children, there wasn't much to do but run away and go to dinner. When they returned to the spot that evening, there were several coyotes that had been absolutely shredded apart. Nothing like a predator attack or a bear, which were not common for the area, especially on coyotes. They're almost always just roadkill. and to see what is essentially a pack of coyotes all together, dead, is almost always a human occurrence. The thing here, though, is this was a fishing and cottage town. Most people don't even live there year round, and there's never wildlife problems as there's no need to defend fishing poles and cottages from occasional coyotes. It would have been known by all residents at the time if 6 to 7 coyotes got put down and dumped there. She says they were ripped up as if something was gunning straight for the organs, and nothing else. Holes ripped straight into their carcasses with guts splayed everywhere as if they were pulled, not picked at or anything. More blood than fur. She relates it to the alien cow consumption stuff. It wasn't eating like an animal, but consuming nonetheless, if that makes sense. The only thing that vicious are fishers and wolverines, and then they certainly won't take down several coyotes and drag them to the same spot either. Very odd story, and every time we visit that spot, I get the heebie-jeebies. The land has a lot of native and settler history, with many high strangeness occurrences reported, and not the only report of rake-like entities in the greater region. My girlfriend says she had absolutely zero awareness of creepypastas, old internet horror stuff or long gray beings before, and it is corroborated to this day by the cousins. Freaky shit. We are both, by all means, quite skeptical people. But given the area and how adamant my girlfriend and her cousins were, it's hard for me to discount Halloween encounter. By Swimming Wrangler 3650. Me and my buddies were fucking around close to 11 p.m. on Halloween 2024. We walked down our cul-de-sac where there's a bunch of woods for miles. No lights except our phones, and my dumbass decides to say, "Hey, y'all know what skinwalkers are?" My friend says, "Yeah, you're not supposed to whistle or something at night, right?" Or something along those lines. Anyway, we start saying skinwalker, whistling, everything you're not supposed to do. All of the sudden, there's this gut-wrenching deep scream from I have no idea where because it was that loud. Me and my friends take off running as it keeps screaming over and over. 5 minutes later, after the adrenaline wears off, we go back down with one more friend who thinks we're messing with him. Not even halfway down, we hear a low whimper, then it happens again. Once more we take off running. I still have no idea what it was. Couldn't sleep that night, always felt like I was being watched. I'm a big conspiracy theorist, but never thought that could happen to me. I know how it sounds because it was Halloween, but there was no decorations. We made sure everyone was gone before we went down there because we were partying. When I tell you that sound couldn't been human, I mean it. Strange experience near the river. By something edgy. This happened about an hour ago, and I wanted to post it before the details fade. I live next to the Little Econ River in Orlando, and have been wandering around in this section of woods for about 2 years now since I moved into this house. I am very familiar with the area even though there are no trails, and can even navigate at night with no flashlight with good accuracy. This is a narrow strip of wilderness between the river and the neighborhood surrounding, but there is little to no human activity out there that I have seen. There is a good amount of wildlife out there, lots of deer, hogs, owls, occasional bear, and other Florida-type animals. I have always considered the owls to be friendly and good-spirited in the many close encounters I have had with them. Tonight I went for a walk alone after work to wind down and distress from the day. The walk out to the river was perfectly normal, and while I sat by the river for 20-30 minutes, nothing seemed amiss. It was starting to get dark, and I got up to head back when things started getting strange. Keep in mind I'm only about a 1.5 mile walk from my front door, but I'm in an area that looks like untouched ancient Florida. A few 100 feet from the river I hear an owl pretty close to me, so I start to look for it to see if I can get a picture. It hoots a few more times and then flies off, and I finally see it. As soon as it flies off, I smell the unmistakable smell of rotting meat. I like collecting skulls, so I began to look for the source of the smell to see if there's a good skull. I started walking around the area trying to find the source, but as I moved from where I was the smell faded, and it would get stronger in one specific spot. I'm looking all over in this spot that is about 6 feet in diameter, where I can smell it, but can't find anything, even though it smells like there should be a whole deer or something dead right there. I look into the trees and still see nothing, and then the smell suddenly goes away completely. I have had some strange experiences out in these woods before, but nothing like this, so when the smell disappeared I knew it was time to leave. As I started walking away, the smell came back, just as strong as before, but in a different spot about 20 feet away from the first spot. I looked into that spot for a minute or two before the smell vanished again, at which point I knew I needed to leave the woods. I started walking calmly but swiftly back the way I came, and the smell followed me for about a minute through the most dense part of the woods. Against my instincts, I did look back several times to see if anything was following me, but never saw anything. I had been listening to music this whole time, and didn't dare turn it off to try to hear anything around me. I just kept up the pace, and finally made it out of the woods to the main park area. As I got out of the woods, I started getting strong chills all the way down my spine, and I half expected to turn around and see some creature watching me from the edge of the woods, though I didn't see anything. I've felt an energy in these woods since the first time I went out there, but I've never had an experience actually break into the physical realm where I could actually smell something that didn't seem to have a source. I took the same route out and back and didn't smell anything on my way out. Now that it's completely dark, I'm gonna go back out there and see if the smell is still there. Encounter in a Suburban Area by Riri Butterfly. I just wanted to share my experience/encounter as we haven't been able to make sense of it until this day. About 8 years ago, my boyfriend and I were parked on a suburban street down the road from where he lived. This was near midnight, and the street was completely quiet and no cars in sight. We are in Australia. We were talking when suddenly we noticed this figure in front of us. We both described it exactly the same. It was very tall, very skinny, beige color, long arms, long legs, no hair, and was hunched over. It was not running, but moving faster than usual walking pace. It was like creeping about. We both froze and said, "Do you see what's in front of us right now?" We were so shocked and scared. We'd never seen anything like it and never heard of skinwalkers before. Until now, actually. It stopped moving, turned its head, and looked straight at us. It tilted its head a little looking at us, and then kept on moving forward. I thought I saw it smile at us, but now I can't be sure. I felt like I was crazy at the time. As soon as it took its eyes off us, my boyfriend turned on the car, as we tried to follow it, though it turned a nearby corner, and we lost it so quickly. We looked down the street, and couldn't see it anywhere. I think we were just very curious at the time, like we didn't know whether this was an alien or what. We went straight home. I was so scared to leave again. We felt crazy when we tried to describe to others what we had seen. My dad claims he encountered a skinwalker. By Anonymous. My dad very seriously told me a story and swears on his life it happened to him and a group of friends that were there. Back when he was at university in Colorado, he was part of a rock climbing group. One day they go out for a sunrise climb in a mountain, and it was not completely light out yet. In the distance they saw a figure, but since it was still a bit dark, they couldn't completely see who it was, and thought it was a fellow climber, so they waved. He says it looked like just a man standing up, and it waved back and then turned and morphed into a four-legged animal. What he says looked like a wolf and ran away. Everyone in the group saw this, not just him, and he said everyone was so confused and creeped out. It's a short story and ends there, but when he told it to me, he said it was a skinwalker. However, I have learned that skinwalkers are more evil and often lure people to them. This seemed like a harmless, friendly encounter, so I'm not sure. But not long after he told me this story, I had a bizarre dream where they appeared. Basically, they told me without words that they exist in between our worlds. They do not know what they are. They want to be alive. They are not evil, but at the same time they see humans as food or energy, like a bear sees moose, but more like a predisposed bacteria. They have self-awareness without full consciousness. They express a form of instinctual hunger, blind striving, and a lack of moral framework, not out of malice but nature. Mimic Behavior by Bucket 57354. This is a true story. Back in 2019, my son and I joined my parents on a trip to Cornville, Arizona. Cornville is an unincorporated community about 20 minutes west of Sedona, basically bordering the Coconino National Forest. For some more context, we were staying in an Airbnb that backed up to a huge rocky valley. I mean nothing for miles. It was pitch black at night, and there were only two other homes on the street, and we were at the end. My son also has autism. He was nonverbal and 2 years old at the time. He has a very distinct wail, at least to me as his mom. He also needed a close eye kept on him, because he would try to Harry Houdini out of the house, as is common with many autistic children. My son was sleeping in a cot in my parents' room, which had a sliding lockable glass door to the backyard in it. I was in the room next to them, but it faced the front of the house. Once everyone went to bed, I would stay up and talk to my now husband on the phone, and do some art. One night, I remember just feeling absolutely freaked out and paranoid in the living area, which had huge bay windows to the backyard. I felt like there were things outside of my view, lurking in the dark. They could see me, but I couldn't see them. I tried my best not to think about it though, and decided to just go to bed, because I must have just smoked too much and was freaking myself out. I remember not being able to sleep. I just kept laying there, scared to breathe, scared to close my eyes. I felt like if I closed my eyes, whatever it was would get me. I was too afraid to move, to draw attention to myself. As I was laying there from outside of the window, I heard my son start crying and wailing, and I know my son. That was my son's cry, outside of the window, in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, with dangerous terrain surrounding us. I immediately jumped out of bed, ran to where my parents were sleeping to wake them up and help me, and to yell at them for not keeping the door locked. I flung the door open in a panic and saw my son, fast asleep in his cot. I woke my mom up and asked if he had been crying. He hadn't. He was sound asleep and didn't make a peep for the last couple of hours. I didn't speak about what happened, just apologized and made sure the door was locked. I told her I must have just dreamt it. I know I didn't. My mom woke up in the morning and found me asleep on the floor of the closet, with all of the lights on and the door barricaded shut. I still don't like thinking about it. I've never told the story out loud. I don't acknowledge it for the most part. I refuse to say any type of name after that. I don't listen to any content about it. I try to mind my business. Sometimes while I'm outside at night, in my own backyard, way out in southeast Wisconsin, I get sudden chills and a panic that tells me not to move fast, not to act scared, and to get the hell back in the house and lock the doors. I refuse to go back to northern Arizona. I will never ever go back there. I have no idea what was outside of that window, and I never want to know. Possible encounter by outrageous nobody 468. I'm on vacation in a small town with a population of 700 in North Dakota, about 30 minutes from the Canadian border, with my mom and my boyfriend. We go here every summer, and this is the first time I've had an experience like this. Keep in mind my brother and his wife, whose house we're staying at for the week, has 7 chickens that are all accounted for and put into the coop around sunset. It was around midnight, and my boyfriend and I were on the deck in the backyard of my brother's house, and we had already been talking about skinwalkers previously. Yes, a stupid idea. Then after the conversation, switched topics over about 30 minutes. In the middle of my boyfriend's sentence, I heard a chicken's balk, only raising in tone and pitch. I know what a chicken sounds like. It was not this. This was something trying to sound like a chicken. Chickens have a bit more of a gurgly and rough call. This was far too smooth, and definitely did not come from a chicken's vocal cords. It lasted for about 4 to 5 seconds. I instantly shushed my boyfriend, and it stopped 2-ish seconds after he stopped talking. I asked him if he heard that, and he said yes. About 5 seconds after the sound, we heard what seemed to be one or two footsteps on the grass, around 12 feet away from us in total, and about 5 feet away from the deck. Right where we had heard these steps was the exact spot that one of my family members had given his granddaughter a chicken to hold. I can't help but wonder if whatever entity that made that noise may have seen that, and thought it could lure someone to it. We sat in silence for a sec, and then we started talking about what just happened. Minutes went by with both of us terrified to move. Eventually, we gathered our stuff and went inside for the night. I'm open to any ideas on what this could have been, realistic and paranormal. Weird experience. By Objective Living 6442, this took place in Japan about 10 years ago. I have no idea what it could have been, but I think it could have been a mononoke, the Japanese version of a skinwalker. Basically, it was like 4 in the morning, and I heard what sounded like a woman screaming out on the road, which is like 200 feet down from my apartment. I lived on the ninth floor. Sometimes drunk people make a ruckus, so I just ignored it, and it happened again, so I took notice, and on the third scream I went out to look. Once I got out on the walkway, it sounded like it was coming from the foot of the building, and I leaned over to look. Then it sounded like it was further down to the right, and just a few floors down. So I walked to the right, and then I heard it from like the floor below, but way down the hall. I was starting to think it was weird that the sound kept seeming to change where it was coming from, and it seemed like the scream was happening with intervals at every 15 seconds. I walked a little further down and was getting near the stairwell. The next scream sounded really hoarse and almost like it had an animal quality to it, and it dawned on me the scream had been changing timbre, and it reached a point that I noticed it. I stopped, and then the next scream sounded like what I would describe as a fox's scream coming from a human's mouth, just one floor down in the stairwell. Then it went silent for like a minute, and I took a couple steps forward. Up till that point I only had felt concern. What if someone was in trouble and needed my help? But then I got goosebumps from my arms up my back to my head. Then immediately around the corner from me, where the stairs were, I heard two sounds at once. One, like someone was whispering really loudly, and the other, like someone was talking with gurgling sounds. I froze and started backing away, and everything went silent. Like there was no ambient traffic sounds or train sounds, and I lived next to a train station for fuck's sake. It was dead and completely silent, and I felt like something was watching me. I backed all the way back to my apartment and didn't hear anything until I got back inside. I saw one, by Human Nomad. For context, I live in northern Arizona on a rural property that borders protected native land. Last night I was alone on the property, leaving at about 8:30 p.m. to do some weekend door dashing. I was sitting on the trunk of my car, tying my shoes, when out of my periphery I started to see some movement. I tried not to move my head to look at it too quickly, because I thought it may be a fawn. I couldn't have been more wrong. It looked like a cross between Gollum from Lord of the Rings and a baby deer. It was not very big, but the way it moved was very otherworldly and disturbing. I heard what sounded like distressed bird noises moments before it appeared as well. I think it saw me notice it, because it crept back into the dark, but didn't turn its back to me. And while all this was happening, my cats and my buddy's dog all came out and surrounded me, almost like they were trying to protect me, and warned me not to mess with that thing. I pretended to ignore it and simply drove away. But I came back later in the night around midnight, and it was gone. But I still felt like I was being watched. This morning every single one of my car's doors was found wide open by my roommate. We both suspect each other of messing with the other, because I told him what I saw last night. but I explicitly know that I shut those doors, and I don't think my roommate is lying, not from his reaction. So my concern is that was this thing targeting me? Is there something I can do to appease it? As much as it did freak me out, I picked up a sad energy from this creature, like it was a cursed child or something. I would like to help it if I can. When I came home, there was a bat sitting on the ground on the middle of the driveway. I got close slowly to confirm what it was, and at the last second flew up right at my windshield and flew away. Could it have been a random coincidence? But it was a weird moment. I've never seen a bat sit on the ground before in my life. My most recent sighting. By Altsy Wait. I live on the Navajo reservation, and a few days ago I saw my most recent shapeshifter. It happened at a well. On the res there is no water infrastructure, so most people haul water to their homes. On this day I checked on my relatives, and they needed water. I took the truck down and loaded up their buckets and jugs. For water, there is a beautiful valley with a wash going down the middle. Inside the wash is an old surface well with an old hand pump. I call it beautiful because there are lots of trees and grass surrounding the well, and it makes me feel happy and exhilarated. I unpacked the water containers and filled them. This took about 10 minutes. Afterwards, I diligently placed the jugs and buckets back into the truck. As my passenger and I got back into the cab of the truck, I noticed movement on a nearby hill. I pointed to the hill and said, "There's someone up there." As I spoke, we clearly saw an old man with a cane. When he saw us peering at him, he quickly hobbled behind a dirt outcropping. Rather than driving off, I waited. "Let's see what he does," I said as we both eyed the outcropping. I expected him to hobble out the other side and wave at us. Seconds later a crow flew out from behind the outcropping. The crow flew over us and down the valley. Our eyes widened and we sat speechless. I started the truck and drove off. When we pulled onto the road I said, "I didn't know they could become crows." Interesting experience by Mothmano Amano. Last week I visited Monument Valley with some family. We took a vehicle tour of the area, guided by an older Navajo man. When we mentioned to him where we planned to camp that night, he told us that the area was known for skinwalkers. He talked a little about skinwalkers, but I didn't ask too much as I didn't want to be disrespectful, knowing they're not really supposed to talk about them. One thing he mentioned is that skinwalkers will cause nightmares or visit you in your nightmares. That night we set up our camper in a beautiful spot north of Monument Valley. At some point in the night I had an experience that didn't feel like a dream, but more like a vision. I saw the image of a cat or cat-like creature walking towards me, then slowly standing up on two legs, beginning to shimmer, and then glitch as it became darker and more human-like. It wasn't doing anything menacing, but it felt very threatening. I woke up, but it felt like I had already been awake. I'm a very skeptical person, and I'm not fearful of skinwalkers or other paranormal phenomena, so I don't think it was an anxious, intruding thought, but definitely found it interesting and wanted to share and see if anyone else has ever had a similar experience. My Strange Encounter One Night by Useful Gain 9910. During my time at school, a few precarious circumstances landed me with no car. Because of this, I was forced to move to an apartment that would have put me within striking distance of my campus. Being that it was about a 2-mile journey, with my city's relatively small downtown falling in between my complex and school, I found it most rational to purchase an electric scooter as my primary form of transportation. My city ran alongside a river, and my apartment happened to border it. This gave me a nice view, but more importantly, it gave me direct access to the greenway that allowed me to circumvent all traffic on my scooter. It was a straight shot from one end of the city, my campus, to the other, where I lived. The greenway did have one flaw that regularly proved to be detrimental. There was almost no light for about a quarter of a mile in the section behind my apartment, and where I got on. My scooter was nice, but the headlight was abysmal. I resolved to cease using it entirely, instead relying on my eyes to be able to discern movement on the path ahead. During my year-long stay at Riverside, I could count on one hand the number of people I saw on the path after dark. Guess I was the only one crazy enough to be out there so late, so regularly. I drove past a naked homeless person tweaking about a mile from my house, calling the cops upon my arrival back home. I drove past one man whose chilling gaze could be felt even in pitch black. He must have not been too happy to see an electric vehicle with no lights at such an hour, which I couldn't blame him for. Of the encounters I had on that path, there is only one that still haunts me. One I couldn't tell my friends or family because I was sure no one would believe me. Like any other of my evening commutes, I made it to the gate in the back of my complex that led up to my home. I was confident in the dark, and I didn't fright easily, but as I unlatched the gate I felt the sensation I had when that man was staring me down. I was being watched. Looking down the path to the section that lay ahead about 20 yards or so, under a flickering orange street lamp that signified the end of the greenway, was a strange large wolf staring at me. It was as if it had been taxidermied. I couldn't see it breathing or blinking, just staring. Its eyes were almost human. Despite the distance, I could easily discern its iris. Small and beady, I felt frozen and a morbid sense of dread overwhelmed me. I didn't dare get any closer, nor did it. We were locked within a mutual trance, and the entire time it was completely still. I wasn't sure how long I had been standing there, but I didn't take my eyes off it. I felt like that's what it wanted. I knew my gaze was the only thing holding it in place. The river flowing and the sound of cars passing by on a nearby highway felt deafening. Further down the path in the foliage adjacent, past whatever that thing was, there was the crackle of twigs being broken under the pressure of what was likely a bunny or groundhog. Before the sound even finished reverberating, the thing had snapped its head to the direction of its source like an owl. Electrical pulses were surging through my body, and I could feel every nerve screaming at me to immediately break for my apartment. However, I was so paralyzed with fear that I kept my gaze upon the creature. Knowing where it was the only thing providing me a sense of comfort. Then, after it had seemingly ascertained the location of the animal, it leapt on its hind legs and darted into the woods. Like a bolt of lightning it was gone, and it took a few seconds for the rest of my body to catch up to what my eyes just saw. Finally, realizing that the thing was fixated on something besides me, I immediately swung open the gate and carried my scooter up the mulchy hill onto the parking lot. In one motion I turned it on, placed it down, and started riding to the side of the complex my apartment was in. I was on autopilot, focusing on perfectly executing whatever actions would lead to the security of my covers. Before I knew it, I was in my room. When I finally sat down on my bed, I felt like I needed to cry. I couldn't understand what had just happened, but with a million thoughts racing through my head, I was just happy the encounter was over. For the rest of my time at Riverside, I decided dealing with the extra traffic going through downtown provided was worth being in the safety of light. I could handle racing past crackheads and junkies, but I never wanted to see that thing again. I hadn't had another similar incident, and when I finally got another car after I graduated, I began to feel safe commuting again. However, I still live in the city. Noises at night make me feel uneasy now, and one time I could swear there was something tapping on my bedroom window. I don't think I'm ever going to be the same, and the confidence I had to take care of myself in the dark has all but vanished. There are things out there that aren't what they seem, things beyond our comprehension and understanding. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to be a hero. Trust me, it's not worth it. A Dog That's Not Quite Right by Comfortable Tie 9893. This happened a while back when my sister was driving me to my place. We both live in small towns surrounded by rural areas. We make this trip about once a month to see one another. We were just casually talking when there was a very sudden, eerie shift in the air. Neither of us said it out loud, though she told me later that she left it too. We have to slow down to cross a small bridge, the only way from one side of this tiny town to the other. And to our right we spot a dog that's not quite right. It's skinny, not like it's underfed, but like its limbs are a little too long. It did not pant, it did not run, it did not react to our car at all. It just stood, head lowered slightly as it watched us pass. It moved slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. In that moment it felt as though it had been waiting, knowing that anyone in town had to funnel past this point.